This is Dr. David Carlisle, President of Charles R. Drew University of Medicine and Science. Since the pioneering work of Dr. Charles R. Drew in blood preservation, we at Charles R. Drew University have been working in collaboration with the community to find new and innovative solutions to the health problems in the community. We've come to rely upon you to shape and sharpen our focus on what really matters. So I invite you to please call in with your questions and contributions to the discussion on this episode of the Good News Radio Magazine as we work together to undo the burden of health disparities in our community, one piece at a time.
See what the official line is.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Good News Radio Magazine, an educational outreach effort of the Division of Community Engagement of Charles R. Drew University of Medicine and Science. This is Melanie Rodriguez here with my co-host Charles McWells, and we want to thank you for taking time to join us for this week's program. Hi Charles, how are you today?
I'm well, Melanie. How are you?
I'm very well, enjoying the weather.
Hi, it's beautiful outside, isn't it?
It's nice.
Spring has sprung in early February.
Let's hope it keeps up.
So I have a question for you, Melanie. Do you have a pink dot on your driver's license?
Actually, Charles, I do.
Okay, very good. Now, what can you tell our audience what that signifies?
That means I am an organ donor.
Very good, very good. Now, if you don't have a pink dot, the question I have for you is what's holding you back? Because there are thousands of people each year who are in need of an organ transplant, and unfortunately, many pass away while waiting to receive one. Many others have a quality of life that can be vastly improved by having a tissue transplant. And today we're going to be able to inspire you, or so we hope, by giving you a chance to hear about the topic of registering to become an organ and tissue donor.
And today we have a few guests in studio with us to talk about organ and tissue donation. We have Charlene Zettl, Terry Long, as well as Mindy and Jesus Cruz. Let me introduce you all to our audience before we get started. Charlene Zettl serves as CEO of Donate Life California, the state-authorized nonprofit that administers the Organ and Tissue Donor Registry. Under her leadership, California's donor registry has grown to nearly 12 million people. A former California State Assemblywoman, Ms. Zettl, also serves as the governor's appointee to the University of California Board of Regents, overseeing policy and fiscal matters for 10 University of California campuses, 5 medical centers, and 3 national laboratories. Mindy and Jesus Cruz are donor parents. Mindy and Jesus' son, Jesus, or Jesse Cruz, collapsed during a college wrestling match. He later passed away and became a tissue and cornea donor. Jesse was honored on the Donate Life Rose Parade float this year, which I saw. Beautiful float. From his bio page on the float, the website, Jesse and Cruz was a very loving being whose inner beauty was evident to everyone who knew him. At 20, he was a college wrestler and academic All-American who once said that he wanted to be remembered as an honest, hardworking individual who was always willing to help out. And on September 18, 2010, Jesse collapsed during his second match of the day and could not be saved. A few years prior, he told his mother he wanted to be an organ donor. Through his tissue and cornea donations, he was able to help others in their time of need. And knowing that he helped enhance the lives of other people has been a form of consolation for his family. And actually, his parents were relating to us that tomorrow was actually Jesse's birthday, so happy early birthday to Jesse and in his memory. And also in the studio with us is Terry Long, who is a liver transplant recipient. Terry, with no history of liver problems, suffered sudden liver failure and nearly died because she was so sick. She was put at the top of the liver transplant waiting list, and just a few days after her diagnosis, she got a transplant. She was one of the lucky ones. So thank you, Terry, for joining us, and we're more than glad to have you here with us today.
We're also privileged to have you, our listening audience, with us today, and we welcome your questions and comments. We want you to participate actively in this broadcast today, so we're going to give you an invitation to call us with any questions or comments. Let me give you our call-in number. That number is area code 310-674-5896. That's 310-674-5896. We're going to take a brief break for a musical selection, and when we return, we're going to talk about organ and tissue donation with Charlene Zettl, Terry Long, and Mindy and Jesus Cruz. Please stay tuned.
It looks like we're having a few technical difficulties getting our music going, but we'd like to once again thank our audience for joining us today for this very important topic. And I think, Charles, if we could just, I guess, move into...
It sounds like a good idea. We'll just start the questioning. So why don't we turn first to you, Charlene Zettl, and give you an opportunity to tell our listeners about the organization that you're with, Donate Life California.
Thank you, Charles and Melanie. Pleasure to be joining you today and with my colleagues here, Jesus and Mindy and Terry. Well, Donate Life California is a state-authorized nonprofit. That means we were created by the California legislature. And we are here to administer the state's organ and tissue donor registry to make sure that it's confidential, that it's accurate, and to make sure that people's last wishes are carried out as they would like to do. And as you mentioned, Melanie, that pink dot, most people go into our registry through the California Department of Motor Vehicles when they apply for their driver's license. So about 95% of that 12 million people came through DMV portals. And when you sign up at the DMV, you in fact will get a permanent pink dot on your driver's license. If you don't have that, you may be missing from the registry. So we encourage you to go directly to our website, www.donatelifecalifornia.org. It'll only take you 30 seconds to register directly.
So let's make sure that our listeners have that website. It's donatelifecalifornia.org. That's donatelifecalifornia.org. Charlene, I want to clear up a misconception that a lot of people, myself included, have about the whole process of indicating that you want to be an organ donor, and particularly with respect to the pink dot process at DMV. I was under the assumption that there were people with certain health conditions that are ineligible from donating. And I have a health condition and was told actually years ago that I wouldn't be able to be an organ donor. So that's why I didn't register through the pink dot process. Could you clarify that for us?
Well, thank you, because that is of concern to many people. And what we say to people is don't let your health concerns, don't rule yourself out. Let doctors, if you are just dying at a hospital, and the only thing that's keeping you going is machines, you have the opportunity to donate. This is the time when the organ recovery organizations with their medical team come in and evaluate your health care. Let them make the decisions, because really we have a number of people that donate despite the fact that they have diabetes or other conditions. These are conditions that do not rule you out from being a donor and saving up to 8 lives.
Well, I have to renew my driver's license this August, so I will be sure to get the pink dot put on my license this time.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah. And aside from kind of the health conditions, as Charles brought up, what are some of the reasons people do not register as donors? Some concerns they have or misconceptions?
Oftentimes there are myths or cultural taboos. California is basically a state of immigrants. So many people come from different lands and cultures, and maybe they haven't been introduced to organ and tissue donation, or death is a taboo to talk about. So we tell people that they have the power to save lives, and that inspires them to sign up. Oftentimes another myth is that people think they're too old. And we've had lung donors in their 70s, late 70s. We've had people donate their corneas in their 80s and 90s so that somebody can see. And so don't rule yourself out because of health or age. The other concern that people have, and I hear this a lot, maybe you've heard that, is, gee, I don't want anyone to see I have a pink dot on my driver's license, because if I'm in an accident the medical personnel are going to look through my driver's license first to see if they should pick me up and take me to the hospital. That is so unbelievably absurd, and I understand the fear. I understand the fear.
Taken before their time.
That's right.
Yes, it's understandable.
All medical personnel, your EMTs, your paramedics, your doctors, your nurses in the emergency room, their focus is on you and saving your life. And it is only when it is apparent that you cannot be saved and, in fact, have gone into to a death-like state that the tests continue. But then the organ recovery team is called in to start evaluating your health. But you have to be declared dead by 2 independent doctors before organ recovery begins.
So to kind of go back a little, I guess, can you kind of tell us why the need for a donor registry?
Well, first of all, the need is to make sure that people's last wishes are honored. And we are also told by donor families, and maybe Jesus and Mindy can attest to this, that it's very helpful to know if their loved one is taken from them. It's very helpful to know what their intentions were. And so it's important that we protect their intentions and their decisions. But it's also very important because in California, we have over 22,000 people on the national transplant waiting list. We have over 123,000 on the national transplant waiting list. And statistically, 21 people die every day because we do not have an organ match to help save these people's lives. So that's why it is important to have a registry, because it facilitates the recovery of life-saving gifts and protects one's intent to donate.
And in registering, when you register, do your donations, do they stay within the state that they're registered, or are they available to the national list as well?
Generally, if you die in California and you're a donor, your your gifts of life will be donated to people in the nearest communities surrounding the recovery hospital. It is based upon the most extreme need, an organ and tissue blood match. Those are the kinds of things that it's based on. So, in general, we try to have recipients be as local as possible.
So you've shared with us some of the sort of adverse statistics on the number of people who are waiting for life-saving transplants and, sadly, the number of people who die each year. Can you give us the flip side of those statistics? How many people each year actually receive transplants?
Well, nationally, about 28,000 people get transplants each year. And so that's wonderful that so many people are saved, but and we wish we could save even more.
Right. Yes, of course.
So when you look at the whole issue of transplants, I'm wondering what are some of the more common organs or tissues that are needed? Where's the greatest need for in terms of organs and tissues for transplant?
The most needed organ nationally and internationally and locally here in California is the need for kidneys. Mm-hmm. As far as the national scene, about 80% of the people on the list need kidneys, and the same here in California. We have about 20,000 people, almost 20,000 people that need a kidney today to save their life. And that is because oftentimes people have diabetes, which can destroy their kidneys. High blood pressure is another condition that destroys kidneys. So this is why the kidneys are the most needed. Then the second one is the liver, but not as prevalent.
Not as prevalent.
Yeah, we certainly have done a number of programs on this broadcast about diabetes, for example, and so we're well aware, and so are our listeners, about the complications that can arise from that condition. So it stands to reason that the need for kidneys would be on the top of the list. Can you talk with us about the types of people who need transplants? You indicated earlier that we have an equal opportunity as a population to donate, but what are the types of people who actually need? Are there particular ages or ethnicities or genders that have a greater need than others for transplants?
We have people of all ages who need transplants, and I did take a look in California today. There are about 8 people waiting for 8 babies, infants, waiting for under the age of 1, waiting for a transplant. But the most need, age group-wise, is between 50 and 65. I think about 10,000 people fall in that category. And then between 35 and 50, maybe another 5,000 of California's 22,000 fall in that category. But it's all ages, all genders. And what's important to know, too, is that disproportionately in California, there are people, the people most in need of organs are people of color, African Americans, Latinos and Hispanics, Asian Pacific Islanders. And so we really need to communicate to those populations the need to sign up to be donors, and certainly want to work to make sure that their health needs are met and they stay healthy. But if they are in need of an organ, to do everything we can to save their lives.
And this would be in regards to compatibility issues. Would people of the same race and ethnicity kind of be more able to be matched with someone that needs it as of the same?
Generally, race is not a be-all and end-all for matching an organ at all.
Okay.
It is tissue typing. It is blood typing. I believe, though, that the incidence of success are greater amongst racial and ethnic similarities.
Well, I think it would be a great time now to bring in one of our other guests on the program today, and we certainly have a full house today. Terry Long is here with us today, and Terry, as we indicated in the intro to the show, has been the recipient of a liver transplant. So, Terry, why don't we start by having you give us a little background on what brought about the need for that transplant?
Okay, thank you for having me. One day, I just wasn't feeling well, and I was pretty healthy. Even though I had a chronic health problem called Crohn's disease, I was pretty healthy, never really had any health problems. So one day I was feeling a little uncomfortable, just didn't feel like myself. So I decided to drive myself to the doctor. I drove myself to Cedars-Sinai. They ran some tests. They sent me home, told me my potassium was low, and to go see my doctor the next day. I did that. They gave me fluids. They sent me home. A few days later, which was a Saturday, I still was feeling, my stomach felt distended. I wasn't eating. And I just didn't feel like myself. So I drove myself to Cedars once again. And this time I said, I'm not leaving until they figure out what's happening. So originally on that Saturday, I was diagnosed with angry gallbladder. My enzymes were elevated, and I had a mass on my kidney. So originally we thought it might be cancer. So this was on a Saturday. And then the very next Tuesday, I was told I needed a transplant. So, to say the least, I was mystified. Like, it hit me like a Mack truck. Going in there that day, I knew I was sick, but I had no idea that I would be faced with needing to have a transplant, a liver transplant at that. And in the beginning, I remember asking my doctor, because I am an African-American female, and at the time I was 45 years old, I said, is it going to be difficult for me to find is it going to be difficult for you guys to find a match for me? And he was very honest with me, and he said, absolutely, it's going to be tough. So this was on a Tuesday, and I can't even tell you what it feels like to wait. And the reason I really can't tell you that is because I became unconscious. I got sick so very fast. And the toxins were going to my brain, and I was losing my mind, and I was losing my fight really, really, really quickly. So by that Friday, I was actually placed on ventilator support. And all this happened in 1 week. I was placed on ventilator support, and basically they told my parents I had a couple of days, and they had to find that organ. So by this time, I was placed on the very top of the list. I was moved to the top of the list. And when you're moved to the top of the list, I think they search outside of California. So on that Sunday morning, I'll never forget this because I've been told this story because I was unconscious, so I wasn't present mentally. My mom said she was getting ready for church, and she got a phone call that they found a donor. And then that Monday morning, I had the surgery. And I think the surgery was about 6 hours. And I probably stayed sedated about 3 days. And actually, when I woke up, I had no idea what I had been through. But I did remember that originally I was supposed to get a liver transplant. I did. So I couldn't talk. So my father was here. And I had just put my father on a plane to go home. And he lives in Louisiana. So my father's standing over me. And I write to him, did I get the liver? And he says, yes. So it's hard for me to say what it felt like waiting because I was so very sick. I just waited a week. So I was very lucky. And I think that's why it's so important to have more donors. Because if you have people like me who come in as an emergency, I didn't have liver disease. I wasn't waiting on the list for a long time. Mm-hmm. It was an emergency, and they needed to find a donor for me quickly.
Yes, Ms. Zettl.
And when we talk about waiting, there and ethnicity and racial races, it is important to note that if you live in Los Angeles area, mm-hmm. and you're African American, and you have just been placed on the waiting list, many are being told today that their wait might be up to 10 years. So there is that an especially long wait for African Americans and kidneys because a racial match is so much better and it has better outcomes.
That must be very difficult to have to hear. I mean, especially if you know that, your disease might not let you stay around that long. So yeah, definitely important for people to donate. And what has your life been like now? Is it comparable to what it was before? Because I know you said you had a pretty relatively good health.
It's good. My liver is good. Because of my transplant, I did experience some other health challenges, but everything is good. And I spend all of my free time, maybe too much of it, I hate to say, volunteering for Donate Life. I volunteer for the American Liver Foundation, and I'm now an ambassador for liver transplant at Cedars-Sinai. So I try to spend as much of my time giving back and primarily educating my community about the need to become donors because we aren't educated and we don't know what transplantation is about. So I've spent time in churches and even with family and friends, just talking to them about the importance of becoming a donor and really what that means, and that I'm the outcome, that this is really what it means to receive a transplant. I don't think I look any different. I probably look healthier than I did before. Okay. But it's a great feeling, to be able to receive this gift of life, and I don't take it lightly at all.
And Ms. Zettl, Terry had mentioned that she got bumped to the top of the list, and actually that was one of my questions is how are people placed on that list, just depending on their situation, or does everybody kind of start from scratch unless they have a very...
People are placed on the list in order of need, and this whole process of who's on the list is governed by an organization, a nonprofit called UNOS, the United Network of Organ Sharing. This nonprofit is federally contracted by the federal government to run the transplant program and the waiting list. They prioritize by need, and they coordinate with the organ recovery organizations. When there is a person who is an eligible donor, these organ recovery organizations contact UNOS to see who in that area is a match for the organs that are available for transplant. And that's how that whole process works. Need, match, how long they've been on the waiting list, their location, because these gifts, time is of importance for each gift.
And go ahead, Charles.
So, Terry Long, I wanted to just have you sort of reflect back on the contribution to your life that was made by this anonymous donor. I wonder if you could share with our listeners what you think about when you reflect upon that.
I'm very grateful for my donor, very grateful for my donor. But at the same time, there's a certain sadness that I sometimes feel when I meet donor families, because I know they have experienced something that is devastating. And I have a son who's now 23 years old. And if I had to deal with that, I think it'd be very difficult. So even though I have not met my donor family, when I meet donor families, it still touches my heart, and it makes me very emotional, because I know that they have struggled with a decision that my donor family had to struggle with, especially being such a young donor. When I think about my 19-year-old donor, she was from Las Vegas. And when I think about her, I think that she just made a very unselfish decision, or her family did, to allow her to be a donor. And I think that is a very unselfish decision. I think people struggle with it. But my heart goes out to her family as well as other donor families, because even though I've received this gift of life and I'm very grateful for it, I still feel pain. And I think I feel that pain because I'm human. And even though I'm not suffering, I still feel like donor families in their own way are suffering. And when you get the opportunity to meet your donor family, there's that great connection, I think, that you can gain from that. I haven't had that opportunity, but I have had the opportunity to meet other donor families. So I try to connect in that way, because I know it's difficult. I know it's painful.
Well, we have an opportunity to hear from a donor family right now, and I want to again thank Mindy and Jesus Cruz for joining us today. And I would like for you to tell our listeners a little bit about Jesse.
Hello, and thank you for having us. And I'll be speaking for Mindy and myself. Well, Jesse was, as you heard earlier, he was a 20-year-old college wrestler, and there was just something special about Jesse. Ever since he was, a little boy, excuse me, he had a smile that was, we called it the $1 million smile. One of his cousins told him there's just this aura about Jesse. He's a golden boy. And, sometimes you hear that about your kids and yeah, okay. I'm sure you tell other people that, but, just watching Jesse with his friends, with his family, little guys. And when I say little guys, I'm talking about 4-year-old kids up to 12 years old, because Jesse wrestled at Northview High School. And once he graduated, he decided to go back and help out as a coach. And he was able to coach what's called the California Grapplers, which is a youth program. And these kids would just flock to Jesse. So, I think that's what shows, the type of person Jesse was. People were attracted to him. He was, sometimes I think, how did you have so many best friends? How did you make time for your family, for your friends? He was just always willing to help out. And and because I think that's the one of the toughest things to see is, him not being around. And, he we can't have him anymore to share those moments with him, to see him around his friends. I've talked to people a lot about, they talk about how Jesse was a wrestler on the mat. But sometimes I tell them, I used to get a big kick out of just watching him warm up before a match or watching him coach other kids. Even his high school teammates would want him to coach them. The head coach was like, "No, you're not going to coach them." But that's just the type of person he was. And, like I said, also off the mat, he was just a great kid. We'd have our little talks, but he would, and, I said, one day, he taught me a lot of lessons. I could fly off the handle about something and really get on him, and he'd just look at me and like, "It's all right, Dad. It's no big deal."
Relax.
And then after I think about it, I was like, "Yeah, it's not even a big deal." And then he'd do it again. So, yeah.
I want to give our listeners our phone number again and remind you that you have an opportunity to share in our dialogue today about organ and tissue transplants. That number is area code 310-674-5896. That's 310-674-5896. We understand that there's a possibility that some of the young people who are attending the high school Jesse went to may be listening to the program today. And if that's so, we certainly would like to hear from you. And sort of on that note, Charlene and Jesus and Mindy Cruz, I'm wondering if you look at your son as a hero in a sense, and let me define what I mean by that. Normally when we think of people who make this important decision to donate an organ or tissue after their life has ended, we think of older people. We think of someone in their 50s or 60s or older. Here's a young man in the prime of his life. I guess he was 21 or younger at that time. 20. Who made that decision. How do you account for that? How did he do that?
That's something he did. And I mean, it was Jesse's character. I think it has a lot to do with his faith. I think you read earlier that he, in his own words, he said he always wanted to be remembered someone that was willing to help out and to give back. And I remember the day at the hospital, when that question came up, I had no problem. I said, I already know what his answer would be. And it was, I remember one of the nurses coming to me and telling me, when they had finally pronounced him, and I don't know why, but I told her the first thing out of my mouth was, "Remember, he wants to be a donor." And she said, "It's probably not possible anymore." And I said, "Well, check, because that's something he wanted to do." And I don't know why that always sticks. And it's very important. A donor, I believe, is a hero. Their families are heroes for honoring their wishes. It like you say, it takes a lot, even for an adult to say, "I want to be a donor," because of the fear of, what does that mean? Mm-hmm. Jesse was willing to step up and say, "I'm going to be a donor," and and I'm sure he did it with the shrug. He had this shrug that he did all the time. "I'm going to be a donor," and that's what I see. Someone, like you say, someone that's full of life. He's got so many things going for him, and he's thinking ahead. Well, when it's time, then I'm not leaving. I'm going to leave something behind, and that's really helped us a lot. We talk about one legacy, and that name is it describes them. It describes what donors are. It's their legacy. Now they're living in or enhancing someone's life, helping someone to live longer, a better life.
And opposed to the nurse's comment, Jesse was able to donate. And what was it that he was able to donate?
Tissue and cornea. So we helped someone with sight and also his tissue. There's various, different types of tissue that's donated. One of them that kind of, I said yes to, and it kind of got me scared afterwards after I thought about it, was bone. I was like, bone? Why did I say yes to bone? The high school, it was high school coach, Coach Ochoa, he runs a bingo night as a fundraiser for the wrestling team. And there was a gentleman there, and he was on crutches for about 2 months. And someone finally asked him, you're still on crutches. What's going on with you? You've been hobbling around. Why aren't you healing? And he said, well, it's taking time because it has to fuse. My ankle shattered so bad that, they couldn't fix it. So I have a donor's, their bones in me. So it's just a matter of it fusing. And when I heard that, he didn't know our story. And I just sat there. I was like, wow. I got that message at the right time, because there's days that, not days, but almost every day that we need that.
And so, talking about tissue, Mrs. Zettl, maybe you can give us some more details about tissue donations and the many ways that they can help, many different possibilities that comes with that, those types of donations?
Yes, what Jesse did was certainly giving back to maybe as many as 50 people through his generous donation of tissue. And tissue saves lives as well as heals and enhances them. For instance, gifts of skin can save burn victims' lives. And to those people, otherwise they would die. If you've ever seen burn victims, it's heart-wrenching. And to be able to have the donor skin, it is truly a miracle. Also important are heart valves. To younger people, oftentimes that they have born with defective heart valves. So this type of tissue can save a life as well. Other things that are important, the bone for back reconstruction, ankles, a lot of dental surgery uses donated bone. And importantly, corneas, restoring the gift of sight. I had one donor that was actually blind, and he donated his corneas so somebody could see. If that isn't so ironic, it's amazing the stories we hear.
And was this a living donor?
No, a deceased donor.
Okay.
A deceased blind donor donated their corneas so 2 other people could see. But and veins are also used for people who have lost circulation. Certain conditions destroy the circulation in the legs and would cause amputations without restoring circulation. So deceased donors can give their veins. It's just a real miracle, and we thank Jesse for his many, many gifts.
Well, when we think of the legacy that donors leave, a question comes up in my mind about whether Jesse had any siblings, for example. Does he have brothers and sisters?
Yes, he has a sister, Brianna. And she's 21 now.
Okay. I'm just wondering, has Brianna made a decision or talked with you about the possibility of becoming an initial?
Oh, yes, she has. When she went to apply for her driver's license about maybe almost 2 years ago, she also did it. Brianna's pretty quiet, but when I initially had the first conversation with my children, it was years back. I had told them that I wanted to be a donor, and I asked their permission. And they looked at me, and my son right away, yeah, of course, that's fine with us. We're cool with it because that's what I'd like to do, And he spoke up, but she kind of quietly nodded and kind of looked at me too. So I know it's something that it's close to her heart, especially now with losing her brother. She attends a lot of the events that Donate Life has sponsored for donor families. Along with us, and it's just been such a blessing to be able to honor, our loved ones in such positive ways.
And what prompted you to kind of think about becoming a donor, to start kind of that conversation with your family?
Well, it's really funny because it was summertime, and we were off, from school in the summer, and we were watching a soap opera, and there was a storyline on the soap opera, General Hospital, where a young girl had passed away and her family had donated her heart. And it was just such a touching story, and my kids were watching it with me. And like I said, it opened up the conversation for us. So that it was a blessing.
Terry Long, you've been a recipient of a liver from a donor. Have you made the decision to become an organ or tissue donor yourself?
I have. I am a donor, and actually, I was a donor prior to getting sick, and I did get my pink dot from the DMV. But what I didn't know at the time is really, what does this mean? What does all this mean? You know, you get the pink dot, but you're like, you know. So there needs to be some follow up and some education as to really what that pink dot is all about. Because I was 16 when I did it. So I was clueless, but now I know there's so many programs that are being offered now to 16-year-olds, to kids in high school, which I think is important because that's when you start driving.
Right.
And I didn't have that opportunity, but I think it's a great opportunity that people have now.
And we've talked about, you know, Jesse was able to donate and Terry received a transplant, but how often are transplants rejected by people's bodies, and do these people get to be put back at the top of the list, or do they have to wait at the bottom?
Fortunately, there are very few failures, but there are some, and it's very tragic. And these people do go right back to the top of the list because they still need. For the most part, though, we have very good success rates now. And one of the main reasons for organ failure is, or transplant failure is because of rejection. So now the protocols for drug treatment to prevent rejection are just excellent. And there are just a number of excellent surgeons at the transplant center. So fortunately, the grafting of the new organ is by and large very successful.
And I heard there's also something called a partial organ donation. Can you explain that to
That's
our
right.
audience?
There are living partial donations and, of course, deceased partial donations. For instance, if there is a smaller person who needs a lung transplant, well, they can take a deceased donor's lung, but they try to match the size. But I have heard of some surgeons who will just use, you know, maybe two of the three lobes to put into that smaller person. And it's amazing how these organs, the liver and the lungs, if they are just a lobe transplanted, even a kidney we see grow into the right size of a person. With living donation, we've seen people give one of their lobes of their lung. We've seen them give part of their liver. And more and more we are seeing living kidney donation because you have two of them.
Sure. Well, what's the quality of life that one can expect after making one of these living donations, partial donations?
Generally, the quality of life is excellent, and most living donors go on and live very normal and healthy lives. So it's great to see that kind of altruism not impacting their health care. And really, the only risk to a living donor is the same as any surgery. You know, there are complications that can occur. Fortunately, these are very, very few.
So the website for Living Donation California has some remarkable stories from living donors expressing their appreciation for having been able to make that contribution in the lives of others. Charlene, can you share some of those stories? Does anything stand out to you when you think of those stories?
We have, all of our stories on our website are incredibly inspiring. And one of the biggest miracles across the United States was about a year ago, there was a kidney chain donation. Okay. It started with an altruistic donor in Riverside. He decided he wanted to save somebody's life. And from there was a kidney was donated to another stranger and back and forth, because oftentimes kidneys cannot be matched by the family. So if they get a donor from a stranger, they feel like the family feels like they have to give. And it goes sometimes across the nation, these kinds of surgeries. So I think as many as 60 lives were touched with that kidney chain. So that was an extraordinary story.
That does sound extraordinary.
But yeah, and when you talk about living donation on our website, California is the first state in the nation that has a government authorized and initiated living donation site. So we are proud to have that here in California, and it is administered by Donate Life California, where we have inspiring stories, facts for people. People can go to that website and do a self-assessment to see if they are healthy enough to donate and what the risks are. We encourage people to go there.
And to take kind of like a light look at the financial aspect of kind of doing transplant surgery, who would cover the costs, let's say, of someone who wants to donate to someone else?
The costs of recovery of an organ is always borne by the recipient's insurance company, and it's never for instance, in deceased donation, the family is not charged for the recovery, for the extra time in the hospital and the surgical suite. These costs do not go back to the family. The same
Donor family.
To the donor family. The same thing with a living donation. The cost of the surgery is picked up by the recipient's health care insurance and so forth.
Are there any costs that are borne by the donor, him or herself? Are there costs associated with recovery or complications that may arise that would be borne by the donor?
The costs are borne by the recovery organization and passed on to the hospitals and the insurance companies and so forth.
Okay. You mentioned a self-assessment that one can take if you go to is it the Living Donation California website?
Mm-hmm. LivingDonationCalifornia.org.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about what some of the questions that are involved in that self-assessment?
Well, they ask why you want to donate. They ask about your health care. If you have active diabetes, you may not be a candidate for, you're not a candidate for living donation because you probably need both of your kidneys to maintain your health. So these questions people go through, and at the end, if they are screened as donation eligible, then they have the option of going to being referred to a transplant center for further evaluation. And it's important to note that even if they go to a transplant center and decide not to do it, that's just fine. There is no requirement that they have to go through the surgery once they start asking these questions and getting these screenings.
So just to kind of recap, kind of go over the conversation, how can we help shrink the transplant waiting list?
Oh, that's a great question. Thank you, Melanie. Number one, we encourage people to sign up on the registry. Whether you're going into a DMV office or renewing your driver's license online, we encourage you to always say yes to donation. And talk to your family about your decision to donate so that they are not left in the dark about your altruism and your intent to donate. We also encourage people to go to our website. We now have a potential for a Donate Life license plate. And if we get 7,500 paid reservations, then the DMV will manufacture these license plates with the Donate Life logo. And as you drive around the highways and the local roads, you will be reminding people to sign up on the registry to save life.
We're coming to the end of our broadcast, and I definitely want to give all four of our guests a chance to sort of give some closing thoughts. But before we do that, I have three little bullet questions that I want to ask Charlene, three little quickie questions. The first one is, what's the minimum age for donating or deciding to donate?
Oh, there is no minimum age, and in fact, um, the it's a blessing when families who have very, very young children and infants decide to donate because these cases are rare and there's such great need. So we have people donating from very young to very old. And when we've had people that 70s and 80s with great health donating organs and certainly donating skin and corneas.
Second question is, can you change your mind?
Oh, about living donation?
Yes.
Yes, you certainly can. At any time, you can change your mind and back out.
And can a family member, a spouse, or what have you, override your decision in any circumstances?
When you sign up on the Donate Life Registry, you are indicating your legal and binding decision to be a donor upon your death. And your family, their opinion is not important here because you've made a legally binding decision. And it will be honored to the fullest extent by the hospitals and the organ recovery organizations.
So as usual, our time on on air tends to run out. But before it does, we want to give each of our guests a final say and perhaps, maybe leave our audience with a comment or any thoughts on organ and tissue that you think is important. Or Mindy and Jesus, you said that Jesse's high school might be listening. And what we didn't get the name of the high school. I want to give them a little shout out if they are listening.
The high school that Jesse attended is Northview High School in Covina, California.
Okay. I actually lived in West Covina for a little while.
I'd just like to say we became ambassadors to the Donate Life, and I am and Jesse are high school ambassadors. So it is really important for us to reach out to the younger generation and teach them about organ donation. That way, when they do go and apply for their driver's license, they'll be familiar with it.
I would like to take this opportunity to personally thank Mindy and Jesus Cruz as donor families as a recipient of an organ. Even though I didn't get your son's organ, I just want to personally thank you guys for being such supporters of such an important cause. And for me, I will spend most of my time hereinafter, getting people in my community to become donors. And if I could touch one person, then that's 8 lives I can possibly save. So that's what I am trying to do. I'm just trying to be that driving force that gets people to become donors.
And Ms. Zettl, final thought or comment?
Well, I encourage you to contact Donate Life California because we depend on our volunteers, such as the Cruzes and Terry Long, for going out and speaking to groups to educate them. So please contact us at donatelifecalifornia.org if you would like a speaker to come and talk to your high school, your church group, your garden club, because the stories that they have, the heroic actions of donors and their families, these are important stories that need to be shared and inspire people to sign up. Thank you.
And for our donor and recipients, are there any other support group or resources aside from Donate Life that you guys have encountered with or been in touch with or that have helped you? Or
I actually have. I've gone to grief counseling through Donate Life, but I've also been in touch with a group called Compassionate Friends, which is a group for parents, bereaved parents. And it's a wonderful organization also.
And would they be able to be looked up online?
Yes, they can. Compassionate Friends.
Mm-hmm. And Mrs. Long? Or Ms. Long?
I've actually, for the last 4 years, participated in what's called the Liver Life Walk with American Liver Foundation. And so far, I've raised about $15,000 towards the cause of trying to end liver disease. And there's over 100 liver diseases. And even though I didn't have a liver disease, that's my personal cause. So I spend time doing that. And then I am an ambassador for Cedars-Sinai. I'm a liver transplant ambassador. And then for Donate Life. So whenever I can offer my time, that's what I'm going to do.
Well, I'm afraid that's all the time that we have for this episode of the Good News Radio Magazine. I want to thank all of our guests, Terry Long, Charlene Zettl, and the Cruz family for being here to share with you their information and stories on organ and tissue donation. I want to, before I turn it over to Melanie to close out the show, I want to give you some information on a few community events that are going on. If you or someone you know is in need of emergency food, please take advantage of the Emergency Food Center at Shiloh Missionary Baptist Church. The church is located at 1511 East 52nd Street in Los Angeles, and the pantry takes place every second and fourth Saturday at 9:30 a.m. For more information, please contact Ms. LaVon Spicer Moore at area code 310-630-9530. That's 310-630-9530. There's a project taking place at Charles R. Drew University of Medicine and Science that is designed to help black women stay HIV negative. Cash and gift cards as well as snacks are provided to eligible participants. For more information, please call area code 323-379-2050. That's 323-379-2050. Did you know that a low level of vitamin D may increase your risk for cancer and heart disease? If you are an African American, overweight, between the ages of 18 and 70 years of age, and have high blood pressure, you may qualify for this study. For more information, call 323-249-5709. That's 323-249-5709. If you are concerned about cancer risk, we urge you to participate in the Southern Los Angeles Patient Navigation and Wellness Center. Those who attend the center's activities will partake in yoga, tai chi, Zumba, relaxation and meditation, support groups, and other activities, including educational workshops on nutrition, cancer prevention, stress, and the side effects of cancer treatment. For more information, call 424-260-6543. That's 424-260-6543. And every Sunday between the hours of 10 a.m. and 2 p.m., Charles R. Drew University of Medicine and Science invites you to take place in the Farmers Market that is hosted on the campus of the Vermont Square. Nope, it's hosted on the campus of Melanie. Where is it hosted?
The Farmers Market
The
is
Farmers
at
Market.
The Dome, Faith Dome.
The Faith Dome. Located at 7901 South Vermont Avenue. I knew it. I was just
Caught me
testing
off
Melanie. 7901 South Vermont Avenue. And the phone number for more information is 323-563-9309. That's 323-563-9309.
And I also wanted to repeat the Donate Life websites available for more information. You have www.donatelifecalifornia.org. For living donations, you have www.livingdonationcalifornia.org. And if you'd like to participate and get a license plate, it's www.donatelifeplate.org. I'd like to thank once again, Charlene Zettl, Terry Long, and Mindy and Jesus Cruz for having joined us today. I'd also like to express my gratitude to our listening audience for your continued support of this program. Please spread the good news with your friends, members of your church home, and your family. Invite them to tune in to this program every Wednesday at 1 p.m. And on behalf of the production team of Dr. David Martins, Miss Andrea Jones, and Charles McWells, this is Melanie Rodriguez wishing you, as always, good afternoon and very good health.